Welcome, everybody, to Bridge to the Galaxy. I'm Tanys Coughlan, your host, and I am thrilled to be joined today with Dr. Lisa Thompson. Hi, Lisa. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's an honor to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, because I know that you work with the ETs in a very sort of intimate way.
I do, and actually, it's been my whole life. I've been a lifelong experiencer contactee, and um, but it took me until 4 years ago to really come out of the closet with it.
Yeah.
So the work that I do, I am a best-selling author, speaker, Galactic Ambassador, and channeler. And then I do healing work as well. So the ETs have given me my own healing modality that I call Galactic Ascension channeling. And we can talk more about that, how that came to be.
Hmm.
I also have a weekly podcast, Connection to the Cosmos with Dr. Lisa Thompson, and I teach retreats, online classes, different things like that. So I um, I can go into how I really how the seed got planted in this, if you would like.
Yeah, please. Yeah, let's hear how you got into this.
So I grew up in a metaphysical spiritual household. My mother, she divorced my dad when I was 2, and she basically started going to astrology classes at night. And being a single mom, she would take me along with her. And so my whole childhood, I'm surrounded by astrologers, and she had psychic friends, witch friends, all the things in the metaphysical world. So that was normal to me. And then when I was 13, we moved from Oklahoma City to Washington State to attend a spiritual school of enlightenment, actually the Ramtha School of Enlightenment. And at 13, then I started learning about higher dimensional reality, consciousness, creating your reality, different meditation kinds of practices. And really, I knew that I chose my mother specifically to be able to come in to not go through religious dogma that I would have to unpack later, that I could just come in and really step right into the spiritual side of things. Now, when I was 15, that's when I had my first conscious memory of being taken into a spacecraft. So it was a nighttime experience. So I was asleep. So I don't remember like how I got into the craft, but all of a sudden I wake up and I'm inside the spacecraft. And it was a small shuttlecraft, just me and my ET guide. And when he picked me up, I had absolutely no fear whatsoever because number one, he looked very human. And number two, I felt like I knew him, like he was my friend. And so we start flying through space. And from the perspective of being inside of the craft, the walls look completely transparent where you could just fully see out into space, which was really cool. And we finally land where we were going. And when we got there, I asked him where we were. He said that we were inside of Io, one of Jupiter's moons. And then he started touring me around what looked like a hospital facility where I could see into different rooms. People were being examined. Nothing scary, though, no probes or anything like, they show in the movies. But everyone looked human. So my next question was like, are you human? Is everyone here human? And he said, no. Those of you that we have brought here are human. We are not. We're humanoid, but we disguise ourselves because our form tends to scare you. And so then my next question was, well, why are we here? Why am I here? And he said that those of us that had been chosen to be brought there were being tested to see if something happened to Earth, if we could live in an environment like that or something similar. Now, this was back in 1988. So we were still in the Cold War, on the verge of World War III. So there really was a timeline where something major could have happened. Um, so then at the end of the tour, I asked him if I could see what he really looked like because as a child, I was obsessed with animals and the weirder, the better for me. So I thought I could handle whatever form he was going to show me. And so what he looked like, he was about 7 feet tall, pure white skin, like really pasty, chalky white skin, big dark eyes, and then long red hair, like
Oh,
fire and
wow.
yeah. And
Yeah.
he had triads or triangles tattooed on his cheeks. So very extreme in his size and his coloration. So I could see how, some people would be quite afraid of that kind of image. but completely benevolent. So then I get returned back home. And I vaguely remember the craft being in my backyard. We lived on 20 acres outside of Olympia, Washington at the time of this experience. So I remember it, and it was heavily forested. And so I vaguely remember the craft outside, but I'm laying in my bed thinking, okay, this is the weirdest dream I've ever had. And so I'm just laying there, okay, this is so weird. Now with dreams, we tend to forget details within 10 minutes of waking up. And so, but I'm 15. I didn't know that. So I'm just thinking, okay, this is a weird dream. Now, a few months later, I was reading Whitley Strieber's book, Communion. And, probably a lot of the audience is familiar with that book, but, he's writing about his experiences of being taken by gray ETs. But at the end of the book, he's interviewing different people that had been taken. And I remember very clearly, they're all having these gray ET experiences, but one guy that he interviewed had a completely different story where he was telling Whitley he had been taken to a moon of Io or moon of Jupiter and told he was one of the chosen ones. And Whitley made a little side comment, seemingly sarcastically, I hope it isn't Io. And as soon as I read that, head to toe chills, tears started coming down my face. And so that was my body's way of telling me, okay, that was a real experience. That was not a dream. Now, because my mom and I were part of this spiritual school and we were learning about ETs and fairies and all the things outside of the physical, 3D realm that we know and experience, I knew that if I told her, she would believe me. So I did. And she got really excited. And a few days later, she then introduced me to one of the other students at our school who had formerly worked for the government, very high clearance, and he knew about some of the different AT groups that the government knows about and works with. So I shared my story with him. And when I got to the part of describing what they look like, he was like, I don't know that race. He said, but we don't know all of them. There are so many out there. He said, but you had a real experience. So not only did I get my own confirmation from my body, my clairsentience, but I also then got that external validation from someone who knows about this stuff. And so that was huge for me to know, in my teenage years, okay, this was real. And I didn't have to go through my life thinking, I was crazy or I made it up or it's a dream, but it planted the seed for the work that I do now as a Galactic Ambassador. And that was, what I now understand why he felt so familiar and felt like a friend is because I had been with them throughout my childhood. But they let me remember this experience because I was emotionally mature enough at that point, and the synchronicity to be reading Whitley's book, to then also, have this guy that's part of our spiritual school, be able to validate it. It was just perfect. And so I know also that I have been with many other groups throughout my life. I really did come here as a star seed, to really do this work. So that's where it began. And then if you want, we can move forward to how I met my Arcturians, but I'll pause for a moment in case you have any questions.
I have a question about, it is moving forward, but it's a question about when you became a Galactic Ambassador. So was there any ceremony around that? Was there a specific way that you were told you were a Galactic Ambassador? Because I know that there are many people that have had different experiences with that. And it's myself, it was very much almost a knighting ceremony that I had. And I know there's others that have had that experience. So I'm just wondering if there was some kind of ceremony or whether it was just a knowing, or were you told? What happened for you?
I was told by my Arcturians, but it was a few years after meeting them
Okay,
and understanding my experience with them.
cool. So let's talk about that then. Let's talk about the meeting the Arcturians, because that was
Yes.
my first experience with them as well, was meeting an Arcturian. So
Okay,
yeah.
beautiful. So this is back October of 2018, and I was taking a psychic intuition class in Olympia still. And the first night of class, our teacher, Lisa, led us through a meditative journey to meet a spirit guide who would help us get extra information if we needed it. Now, I had already started my spiritual business, and my original training was past life regression therapy. And so I had met different spirit guides, humans and animals, but this time it was completely different. I went to a completely different realm where in front of me were the most beautiful blue skinned beings, the typical Arcturian, larger head, bald, thin bodies. And they exuded the most pure love I have ever felt, more so than anything here on earth. And their message to me was, you are one of us. We are one of you. We are family. And then
Beautiful.
there was one that was to the front that was the spokesperson. And so we were to ask if they had a name they wanted to be called. So the name that was given to me was Uluru, like the big rock in Australia. So Uluru. And then they also gave me a gift of a crystal. Now I didn't know what the purpose of that crystal was, but they gave me this gift. So I come out of the journey, and even though I have, I've been this experiencer my whole life, I didn't really I was trying to be normal a lot of my life. And so I hadn't gone down the rabbit hole of knowing what the different AT races look like or any of that at this point. But I came out of the journey and everyone's going around class sharing who their guides are. And um, again, synchronicity, there was a lady in class who knew some of the different AT races. And so when I'm describing what they look like, she's like, that sounds like either the Arcturians or the blue avians. And so I'm like, okay, I have to go home and Google that. So when I went home and Googled what these were, as soon as I saw the images of the Arcturians, it's exactly what I had seen in this journey. And so again, validation.
Hmm.
And so it's over the last 6 years, then, it's taken a little bit, baby steps of like, okay, well, what are we doing here? Why are you showing up? And it was 4 years ago that I moved here to Hawaii from Olympia, Washington. So I live on the big island of Hawaii now. And when I got here, that's when I was able to leave behind my mainstream world, and trying to fit in and be normal. And I was really able to step into, okay, who am I here to be? And they told me very clearly, you are meant to be a galactic ambassador, and it's okay, you're safe. You're going to be safe doing this, because that was one of the things that um, my husband at the time and my mom, she's like, do you really want to be the UFO lady? And I'm like, I guess so, because that's what I'm being called to do. And so one of the ways that they wanted me to start doing this work was actually, so I do night sky watch UFO tours here on the Big Island, where I am introducing the general public to these beings and teaching them about them in a non-fear-based way, because they really want to be known. And the whole government and media and Hollywood trying to spin it as a fear-based thing. So my mission really is to change that fear-based narrative, to have people really understand who they are, why they're here, and how much diversity there really is.
Absolutely. That's been my experience too, that they're very loving when they come. So, you know, I've worked with various races as well. So it's, yeah, I hear where you're coming from. It's an interesting role that we have as Galactic Ambassadors, you know.
Yeah. And so one of the things, so in 2022, because I was sharing my stories with my UFO tour guests, I've written other books. And so I started writing down my stories, writing the information down and doing it as blogs on social media. And some of my friends were like, I feel a new book coming on. And so that prompted me to write Connection to the Cosmos, Remembering Your Galactic Heritage and Embracing Your Oneness. And when I was writing that, then my Arcturians were like, hey, we want to start channeling through you. And now my spiritual school was taught by a channeled ascended master. And in the 80s, that was really weird, like for the majority of the public. And the town that I grew up in, Yelm, was very religious. And so there was a lot of stigma around that kind of thing. And so, and again, trying to be normal and fit in, but knowing it's real. I never thought I would channel because of that. And so I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can do this, but I had to get over whatever other people think of me. It's none of my business. I'm here for a bigger mission. Let my ego step to the side. And so they started channeling through writing at first. And then they were like, we really want to speak through you. And so I had to take some baby steps. And then I did take a channeling course to open up that vocal channel. And so, and because they are higher dimensional beings, there's nothing ever negative that's going to come out from them. And so I'm very careful about only connecting with fifth dimension and higher beings, and who I bring through, because there are other channelers that will bring the lower energies through and have some fear-based or polarized kind of messaging. And so I completely stay away from that. And then, so when I got comfortable, throughout 22, bringing through the Arcturians, so in January of 23, they're like, okay, you're ready. Let's bring in some of your other groups. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. And so they're like, just trust. So I wrote down, including them. So 12 additional races. They just had me write down some names because they wanted me to do this as kind of a class, an online class, so that people could sign up for whatever group they resonated with, or they could do the whole series. And then they just gave me a few key words for what the session might be about, just so that I could do, again, some marketing for it. But I had no clue what was going to come through me. And I just had, again, to really trust into it and step to the side. And so I led 13 different sessions over the first several months of 2023. And the messages were just really beautiful, because what they did was they took people through experiential journeys to understand what they wanted to share. Rather than just talking, they guided them through these experiential journeys so that they could integrate it and embody it in themselves. And that led to me writing my Wisdom of the Galactics, Channeled Messages to Elevate Your Life book last year.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been a wild ride, because, if you had asked me even, 5 years ago, would I be channeling? I'd be like, no, are you kidding me? So
They
that's a
tend
little
to they tend to put us in the position where we do what we need to do because we're meant to do the work, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So how do you find that it's impacted then the 3D part of you in terms?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because when I moved here to Hawaii, again, I didn't have to pretend to be someone that I wasn't, which was really freeing, because my whole life I have cared what other people think. I've had to heal worthiness issues, lovable issues, all the things. And I've had to release my perfectionism as well, because
I'm
that's
a recovering perfectionist too. I get it.
and so coming here, actually it was 3 years ago, they very clearly told me, you have to step out of the polarized reality, because that's the messages they really wanted to bring through. Like, polarization here in our third, fourth dimensional reality, it's simply a mechanism of evolution. From a higher perspective, there really is no good or bad, positive or negative. It's just all experience. It's really neutral in terms of that. And so what they told me was that that I had to take myself out of the polarized reality. I had to let go of feeling like I needed to be a part of any kind of politics, like be vocal or an activist. Because in my younger life, I actually was quite vocal, opinionated, even marching, for human rights, equal rights, things like that. And they're like, no, you need to stop doing that. Don't have anything to do with watching the news. stay out of all of that. You maintain your own environment, maintain your own energy. And what was challenging about that though is that my husband at the time, he was really involved in watching the news and what was going on in politics. And so I would tell him, you can't tell me stuff. You're not allowed. But he would have a hard time. And so now, just over a year ago, he exited. He chose to leave Earth. He committed suicide.
Oh, sorry.
And yeah.
Sorry.
So what's been interesting is that, he's come through from the other side multiple times. And part of why he needed to exit, or why, like, I had this huge timeline jump where something like that, he couldn't be there anymore, so that I could continue the work that I'm doing with this mission. And he's told me, I couldn't help you and support you in the physical realm the way you needed me to, but I can do much more from the other side. And he's like, how I was kind of on the fence about the work you do. He said, well, it's real. It's fully real. Keep doing it. Keep going. And so part of it was, he was very 3D, and I can't help people or be the bridge, the ambassador to help get people to fifth dimension if I'm still living in that really hardcore 3D world.
Yes. That is a big shift that many go through, right? When we start to do this work, having to do those kind of changes. So I'm sorry for your loss. That must be difficult.
Yes, it was, because he was my third husband, and I, after two not great marriages, like, I was like, okay, I'm the common denominator here. Let me do some deep dive healing. And so and the healing is always ongoing, but when I got to a certain point of the healing, that's when I met my husband. And so it was a completely different kind of relationship than the first two, where, he really was the love of my life up to that point.
Mhm.
And so again, so I got to experience what being really loved and supported looked like. And now that he's gone, now that's the basis. And I have another, I'm almost 52. I have another good, like, 50 years left in me, at least. And
Yeah.
so I feel like I'm really stepping into a new book, not just a new chapter of my life. And again, the morning after the suicide, and I'm the one who discovered his body, I was in the middle of leading my galactic retreat.
Oh,
Actually,
no.
the timing was really bad. Oh, the timing is going to be bad no matter what. But I had rented condos for me and the retreat participants. So I wasn't at the house that next morning. I was sitting out on the lanai, just like, really, like, what just happened? And the trees were talking to me. And I'm like, really? Did it have to be that extreme? And they're like, it did. Everything that you're here to do, you have a much bigger mission, and it's all going to be okay. And so, fortunately, because of the deep spiritual understanding that I have my whole life, and knowing that, okay, the physical body dies, but the energy doesn't, that really helped me in a huge way to be able to process that grief in a much faster way and be able to keep moving forward.
Mhm. Well, it certainly, we're here for lessons, and the more experiences we have with those lessons, right, the more we learn and the more we bring forward to our journey. It certainly does help to have that spiritual belief system, right?
Yes.
No matter what the spiritual belief system is, I think it helps moving into that, right?
Right.
So what kind of races have you worked with then? You said the Octurians.
Yep. So the Arcturians, again, they're still the primary group. And part of that is because of the kind of healing work that I do. And I know, you mentioned yourself, that's,
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
the
so,
surgery stuff, and yeah.
okay. Well, and so with the Arcturians, really, what they're helping me do, so the crystal that they gave me in that journey now, so this is what I understand about that, is that that crystal, so I'm a healer in the Arcturian realm, and Uluru, the one that I was communicating with, that represented the group, that's me as my Arcturian self.
Oh,
And so in the Arcturian realm, I am a healer, but of course they don't need healing themselves. But what that crystal in that realm does, and I have one here that I've gotten to receive the energy stronger, is that I send the healing energy from the Arcturian realm down to here, Earth Lisa, to then let that flow through my body so that it is helping Mother Gaia, anyone I'm coming into contact with, and then specifically with my clients that I work with. And so with them, it's really that emotional healing
mhm.
that they're helping to release. Now, I also have a very strong connection with some Syrians, and I got to, in a regression, remember one of my lives as a Syrian, and I was a genetic engineer. And it was during the time of the building of the pyramids, which I can tell that whole story. It was fascinating, but I was not one of the ones like working with the humans. I was helping to upgrade the human body and to really like be able to hold, so that they could hold more energy and consciousness and learn what our boots on the ground Syrians were teaching them how to do. And so with my Syrians, they also come through as part of the healing energy, with that modality. And so they're working with the Arcturians, really more kind of on a physical level and the DNA kind of level. And then to top it off, so one of my favorite groups that I love working with are the Mantis, because they are master healers, master geneticists, just ancient wise beings. And so they also are part of this healing modality to really just make it all beautiful. So those are the three that come through in terms of the healing channeling. And then, I have Lyrans, Pleiadians, Vegans, Zetas, hybrids. So I am part of the Zeta hybrid program. And I know I would have very, very enthusiastically, yes, sign me up for that.
Yeah,
I know a lot of people are afraid of it, but I'm like, no, sign me up, of course.
yeah.
I also have higher dimensional reptilians that I work with, Andromedans. I'm probably forgetting a couple, but
Any Procyon? Because I have a Procyon that comes, and it's unusual.
yeah, no, I haven't.
So
And
I understand they're very high vibrational, like 23rd dimension or something like that. That's what they told
okay.
me.
Oh, blue avians, that's another one that,
Yeah,
yeah,
those are fun.
yeah. So, no, Persions, where I have not heard of them.
I haven't sat with him too long. He's pretty new for me, but he's told me he's like 23rd dimension. So he comes through really as light more than anything.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't really see a physical appearance when they come through
Mhm.
for them. So yeah,
Okay.
very interesting.
So, um, yeah, and I know that there are going to be more groups. They've told me this is just the beginning, this
Mhm.
is, and they've given me a break over the last year so that I could heal because,
Yeah.
it happened. So I led those 13 sessions, and then my husband and we went to Peru for 2 weeks last summer, and it was only like a month or two after we returned that it happened. And so they they've allowed me time to recharge my batteries. And now it's starting. They're like, okay, it's time again. So now I'm in this phase of like ramping up, and we'll see what's going to come through next.
That seems to be the case. I think I've talked to a number of channels regarding the ET stuff, and they do seem to be ramping up quite a bit in terms of that stuff. I know they were pushing me to do more too. So I'm not surprised that they're saying, come on now, it's time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, you can choose not to answer this if it's uncomfortable, but
Okay.
are there any messages that are coming through to you today that we need to hear? And is that, if it's too much for today, that's okay. Okay.
Um, no, oh yeah, no, I've been doing a lot of these and even talking about the suicide and all of that. So like, yeah, so we're good. One of the things that they really over the last um 3 years that they are continually reminding me of, but they actually just helped me to finish writing my newest book, which I just submitted to my publisher for editing, which is about shifting timelines.
Ooh.
And so, because when the suicide happened, and I'm like, oh my God, that is a massive timeline shift of like, I just got propelled into a completely different reality. And I've known about timeline shifting for many years because we were even learning that at my spiritual school. And so especially the Arcturians, what they really want people to understand is that all timelines are existing simultaneously. It's not, there's not just one timeline. And so on our earth here, really focusing on the timeline that you want to be a part of, because there are timelines where, yes, where Earth is going to still be in fear-based, polarized, warring, just this strife. But there are timelines where it's the complete opposite of that, where we are shifted to the fifth dimensional love, compassion, harmony, abundance for everyone.
Yeah.
And so what they want people to understand is where you put your attention. I mean, it is, law of attraction manifestation 101, where you put your attention and your energy and your emotions, that is what you are creating in your life. So the more, like, if you don't want to be anymore in this strife of the polarized reality, then really you need to put your focus on what you want to create. So being in a state of joy, no matter what your situation is going on around you, following your passions, playing. They want us to play more. We get so serious in our work.
Oh, that
And
comes through so many times to
yeah.
play. Yeah.
And the other thing is that, and this isn't just the Arcturians, but this was coming through the Orions. That's another group that I work with, of really getting over the judgment of, number one, ourselves, because wherever we judge ourselves, then we're still judging other people. And so healing that. And so then allowing people to do what they're going to do and believe what they're going to believe, because that really is, we're all here to experience things on our own soul journeys. There is no good or bad, no right or wrong. And so the more that we can get out of like, well, their opinion or their experience is bad. No, it's not. And even if, we don't necessarily agree with it, we can not agree and have the non-judgment be there. We can just allow people to be people.
Mhm.
And so that's what, and I'm not sure when this is going to air, but we have this whole political thing going on right now in the US. And again, I don't even know what's going on because they told me don't get into it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, whichever one wins, it's still, the powers behind them that are controlling everything. But
Yeah.
they don't let me talk about stuff like that. They want the energy to be more in like, okay, let's heal. The more we heal, then we can really operate from a place of love. And and then that love will spread and heal the people and the earth. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you said that you were on a ship and you described one of them. Have you been on any other ships in your experience?
I have, but I I have, and it's not that it's not like really crisp memories of what the craft look like, because that's not the important part of it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about med beds? Have you been into the crystalline chambers and stuff?
I know that they do work on me, and I don't know if it's the med beds. I don't think it is. I think it's actually just energetic
Yeah.
healing. Yeah. And one of the things I know that's becoming a thing where people have the med beds here, but we have our own technology within us.
Yeah.
And so they're like, no, you don't need to get into that.
Yeah, the med beds that I'm referring to are the ones that are on the ships. They're much more like crystalline structure. They're not like our med beds here. So that's because here we're just using the technology that we have at this time, right? Which is not like theirs at all. They're leaps and bounds ahead of us in terms of technology.
Mhm.
So in your healing work as an Arcturian,
Mhm.
how does that work for you in terms of when you're bringing energy from your Arcturian state to your human state or your hybrid state? Are you a hybrid now?
I'm definitely a hybrid.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Mhm. And how do you experience that being a hybrid?
So, well, there was a lot of tinkering that they had to do when I was in my mother's womb, for me to be able to live here on Earth. So my mom knows exactly when I was conceived because she and my dad were on the verge of divorce. And so I was conceived at my aunt's wedding, and I was born a month late. And so again, they knew exactly when I was conceived. I was supposed to be born in November, but I was born in December, right before Christmas. And so the information that I've got, because I was always curious, because I was only 6 pounds, 8 ounces coming. So
Oh,
it's like I wasn't even like a 9 pound, 10 pound baby, overbaked. And so what the information that I got just a couple years ago about this, because I was always curious, like why did I come out late and what was going on? And they were tinkering to make sure that I could actually physically stay here on Earth. But throughout my childhood and actually up through age 28, I had some major issues with my body, illnesses, and just like chronic things and weird things because my body was having a hard time with this earth energy. And I didn't understand it again just till a couple years ago of like why all that was going on. Um, and so now with this Arcturian energy, like anytime I do a session with any of my clients, even it's healing them, but it's healing me as well. Like that energy is filtering through me to work, at that energetic level on my own body. And so, so I love working with clients because I get the benefit of it too. And, just because it is a higher vibrational thing, like I can feel my body raising in vibration, my cells are tingling, and and that definitely is activating my DNA in different ways. And that's the thing, is that the more that we keep ourselves in that higher vibrational frequency, it unlocks beautiful potentials, that we have our superpowers, our clairs, our telepathy, our biolocation. We have all of that ability. And so the more that we can keep that vibration high, then we're going to unlock all of those.
yeah, definitely. So in your retreats, you view ships and stuff that are around. How does that work for you? Do you communicate with them and ask them to come by?
Yeah. So the retreats, part of it is for people to really go deep within to learn how to get to that higher dimensional state, because it's more of an inward journey, not external. The external is like validation, like, okay, yeah, they're here. But what's more important in this connection and the communication is going within. And so, really helping the people get to that state, and then working on things like remote viewing and sending and receiving, opening the clair abilities, learning how to communicate with actual like crystals, or feeling the energy of the colors, and really just the more that we know that we can communicate with the trees, with the crystals, with the animals, that opens up this communication, with the ETs, the telepathy, especially because that's how, all of my groups communicate. It's not like words that they're speaking. And so we do during the day, that's the kind of work we're doing. And then there's also some like soft eye focus and blue grid work that we do, which actually helps to pierce through the dimensions. Now, one thing that's really cool about where I live here in Hawaii is the veil between dimensions is thinner. It's we have so much energy, vortex energy, portals. And so really, all the places I've been around the world, this is one of the places where it really is much thinner. You see the activity, even though the activity is all around everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so teaching people how to really see that. And then like we do with my tours, then at night, then we're using the Generation 3 military night vision goggles to look at the night sky, because what those do is they amplify the amount of light that you can see, by at least 1,000 times. And you're able really then to see every kind of moving object, whether it's a satellite or, a real spacecraft. And one of the things that I love, and this happens pretty regularly, just because I'm so connected, they're like always showing up. There's not a night that they don't show up for me.
Mhm.
And so very regularly now, when they're kind of over us, they'll do a massive power up, sending energy down to us. And, I can feel it in my body, and my guests, they feel it in their body as well. It's like this energy surge that they're giving us.
Beautiful.
So, yeah. And I have a lot of like personal experiences of them showing up and, getting confirmation. Okay, yes, it is a craft. It's not just a really bright star or planet.
Beautiful. Yeah. So what was I thinking now? The plan, like the confirmation that you've had using the binoculars, you said, the
Well, they're night vision goggles.
night vision goggles. Okay, cool. So when you're doing that, have you seen different shapes of ships and stuff?
We have, and we've photographed, our cameras and video cameras can pick up things that our eyes don't see as well. And then we can zoom in. And so, yeah, we have seen triangular craft, cigar shaped craft, spheres, discs. There was one that this has only happened one time where a local family was out, and we trade tours. They have a really cool mantis snorkel tour, but they come out and it's like they are super galactic. They always attract really cool activity. And so the teenage daughter, she's like, "What is that?" And what we were seeing in the night sky was it looked like someone took a white Sharpie or a white chalk and drew a big squiggle in the sky. And so we're watching it, and it starts taking a shape, kind of like an amoeba, where it was just a white chalky outline. So you could still see through it. And then it changed shape to a bell. And then it came closer and closer to us, getting bigger and bigger. And then it stopped, and it just stayed there for probably 5 minutes. And then it just kind of dissipated. And so that one, very different.
Interesting.
Now, yeah, there was another one where we didn't even need the goggles, because actually it was on the 2/22/22 portal day. And one of my friends and I, we were hosting a big group journey to, basically a CE5 event, to call them in down at her place. And I led everyone through this meditation, and it was raining really hard. We were under a covered pavilion, but it's just raining, and I'm like, we're not going to be able to get the goggles out. And the rain stopped when we were done with the meditation, but it was still full clouds. And what was interesting though is, so my husband and I, we were walking up to where our car was, because we were going to get something out of the car, and the other people were still down below. But when we're walking up through the clouds, this massive pyramid laser sharp, like behind you. Like
Hmm.
imagine that giant pierce laser sharp through the clouds and
Wow.
appeared. And so, there's nothing that would be doing that, of
No,
this.
exactly. Yeah, for sure. Now, did you get any information about those two, the triangle and the squiggle?
So the pyramid one, those were Andromedans.
Okay.
And the squiggle one, I didn't get any information about, but there was one, oh my, I love this story. So March 7th of last year, um, I was I was talking at the local bookstore, which is about an hour south of my house. I was talking about my book, Connection to the Cosmos, and sharing about ETs with the audience. And on the way home, it was really dark. But the whole way home, our drive, I'm asking them, okay, guys, I was just talking about you. Please show me signs that you're here with me. And normally I will see things as I'm driving down our very dark highway. Our island is not very populated. So, and we don't have a lot of light pollution either, which is fantastic. So I'm driving and nothing's showing up. And so I get about a block away from my house. And all of a sudden, this really bright light shows up above the tree line. And I'm like, okay, I see you, but I'm going to go home and park my car. So I go home, I go to my driveway, park my car, walk to the end of the driveway and look across to see if it's still there. And it was. So it's above the tree line, above my neighbor's house. And it was just stationary, but it was pulsing and it was really bright. And so first thing I had to do though, and because again, I am a scientist, had to make sure it was not a star or a planet. And so I get my constellation app out, nothing's there. So then I'm like, I start talking to it and I'm like, okay, I know you're a craft. Please do something for me that a spacecraft can do that a star can't do. So what it did was it completely dimmed out where I couldn't see it. And a few seconds later, it came back on full brightness. And I got really excited. I was like, do it again, do it again. And it did it again. It dimmed out. And then a few seconds later, it came back on. And I was like, do it again. I asked it 5 times because I needed that validation.
Yeah.
So 5 times it did that. And then it just stayed on when I stopped asking. And so then I'm just like, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I've got my phone. Let me try to photograph it and video it. And so, what my eye was seeing was very different than what my phone was showing. So I didn't know if I was getting anything good. But I'm just thanking it for being there. And so at some point, because I hadn't even been inside the house yet, I'm like, okay, thank you for coming. I gotta go. I need to go in the house now. And so I go in and I'm looking through the videos and the pictures, and it turns out I did get really good footage. And so structurally, it looked like a double donut. So it was like a circle within a circle. And with the movement, it was pulsing, but there was also rotation going on. And
Oh,
so what I feel like the actual structure of it was like a Merkaba, where it was counterclockwise turning.
nice.
That's what I got. And that was a Pleiadian craft. And the next day, so this was the weirdest thing. So the next day, March 8th, was the day that I was channeling the Pleiadians. But starting at 5:30 in the morning, people were waking up, going to work, and there were these spaceship clouds all over our island. Now, lenticular clouds are what they're called scientifically, but we do not have the conditions here in Hawaii to create those clouds. But these clouds seriously stayed around from 5:30 a.m. till 10:30 p.m. in place. And all the normal clouds were blowing by, but these guys were stationary. And it was all over social media because everyone was like, oh my God, these clouds, because again, never happened.
Yeah.
And I mean, and they were massive. And so again, I'm like, okay, Pleiadians.
Yeah.
And there's a very strong connection with the Pleiadians and Hawaii, actually all the Pacific Rim countries, but very strong connection here with the Pleiadians.
I think the Pleiadians are probably one of the main ones that people really work with, I think, that
Yeah.
do our kind of work. I know I have two Pleiadian guides that I work with, and they're a lovely, lovely race. They're so
Yes.
joyful.
Yes.
Yeah, they're awesome. So in terms of the spaceships and stuff that you've seen, how much footage have you gotten? You mentioned you had that footage.
Yeah, so
Is
over
it
the
something like, is it something that you get a lot of, or is it?
well, so in terms of I have quite a few photos over the last few years. I've got videos from our night vision video camera, and then a few from just the iPhone, from videoing that. Because there was one, we got really good footage April 1st of this year of one that was flying over my neighborhood. So there was an airplane. Where the way that our airplanes work, we don't have any overhead airplanes flying over our islands. We're so remote. So we don't have the international flights flying over at 35,000 feet. So most of our airplanes are really pretty low to the tree line, like flying in and out of the Waimea airport, or straight out in the ocean, flying in and out of Kona airport, where we sit and do the tours. So there was an airplane that was flying over to Waimea, which is a town not too far from my neighborhood. And then there was this white light that was kind of following the same path. And it was low enough. And I'm like, okay, that is not a satellite. And I lasered it and it dimmed out and then it came back on. So I'm like, yeah, it's definitely not a satellite. And so my friend who was helping me on the tour, I'm like, try to get, get some video of this. And so he's doing the video. And then, so at the end of the tour, we're looking at the footage, and what he did when he slowed it down frame by frame, we could see, so even though to our eyes it looked like it was just white light moving, when in the slowed down version, you can see this craft changing shape and color.
Oh,
It's
wow.
really incredible.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And even just last week, I had someone on the island who lives probably an hour south of where I live. And it was after the homecoming football game, and she's just out watching the water from her house. And 10:30 at night, this craft over the water it's doing like really crazy things, and then it's just kind of there, and then it looks like these other lights are coming out of it, and that she watched it for 2 hours and got video of it. And then she decided not to go in the house at 12:30. She was falling asleep. She got in her truck bed, so she could still see the ocean, and she kept waking up and it was still there. Now in the morning it was gone, but her sense was that it was being worked on, by these other little things that were coming out of it. But that footage is crazy. There's so many people here in our islands, and my island specifically, that have these sightings here all the time. And we have a lot of the transmedium craft. And I think that, so one of the other groups I work with, the Agarthans, the inner earth beings. And
Mm.
so a lot of these transmedium craft, the information that I've gotten is that it is our inner earth brothers and sisters coming up and, surveying what's going on the surface. And
Uh,
I know part of my work with them in the astral realm, they don't let me remember it consciously because they're like, you would never want to come back to the surface, is basically helping give them information about what's going on the surface.
yeah,
And we're going to balance from both sides the
nice.
energy. Yeah.
So how does being a scientist impact your journey with all of these beings?
Well, it really interesting. So I got into science because I was obsessed with the animals. And so my undergrad is in marine biology, and then my PhD, the department I was in at University of Chicago, was organismal biology and anatomy. And so basically, as a professor, I was teaching things like marine biology, zoology, comparative anatomy, physiology, um, biodiversity, things like that. And I got into science because of these animals. Like, I just loved them. And I understand it now, that one of my roles out in the universe, and I've had many lives like this, is I am a biodiversity expert. Like that's why, I help seed things on different planets, and I'm the keeper of the genes. So it makes sense that I would be, doing that for my first career. But when I was in grad school and I was telling my friends, oh yeah, extraterrestrials are real and I've been on a craft and, I know dragons and fairies and mer people are real. And they're all like, what? And so I learned very quickly I had to keep my mouth shut to be taken seriously as a scientist and to actually be employable. And so really it was very confining because I was still, or I had gone back to my spiritual school after being out of it for, through college. At the end of grad school, I got reintroduced because at that time, then they were really teaching the science underlying the woo-woo, the spiritual stuff. So really quantum mechanics and brain physiology. And so I was like, okay, cool. This, there's science underlying this. And so that conflicted with being a professor in a very in the box kind of reality. And so I felt myself very stifled. And so I only taught for a couple years and then I'm like, I have got to get out of academia because everyone was so closed-minded. And this was back, when I got my degree, I got it in the year 2000, my PhD. And so, still very, very closed off. And only in the last maybe few years are people starting to expand, the fact that Avi Loeb at Harvard is talking about this stuff and,
Yeah.
and other people like him that are in academia. But I could not have lasted these past 22 years with it being still so shut down.
Yeah.
So I have the scientific mind, and some of my friends were like, I can't believe you believe in this stuff. And I'm like, we as scientists, we're supposed to be open-minded. Like we are supposed to be discovering new things, there's so much more than what we know. And if you're closed-minded, then how are you going to discover new things?
That's right. Yeah. You have to be able open and curious, right? To ask the questions.
Yes.
Exactly.
And because really the mainstream, academic people, they, and this is true for archaeology as well, they are so tight on wanting to still be right about whatever they came up with that if you are too far out of the box, you're not going to get the grant funding. They're not going to publish your papers. And so it's really like an old boys school kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, I think this is going to have to shift in the new age.
Yes.
I think as we move forward, um, I mean, they won't be able to discount after disclosure, like after public disclosure, right? I mean, I know there's a lot of disclosure, but when it's really open public disclosure, they're not going to be able to stay in
Yeah.
their box, right?
No, no. And people like us, we are the disclosure, right? And the more that, and this is partly why I do actually love leading my tours because I'm planting seeds in the
Yeah.
mind of people. And when they get to see something that's not a satellite, they're like, oh, okay, this is
Yeah.
real.
I love those light bulb moments, don't you?
Yes.
That's awesome. Well, is there any final words you'd like to share with us?
Just, really creating your own environment and maintaining that there's going to be a lot happening over the next several years, and it's ramping up. And even though it might be scary that systems are falling apart, they need to in order for us to rebuild to a beautiful new reality. We cannot stay in this, really rigid, very polarized reality. And so for those that are ready to shift, then again, focus on what you want to create in your life and hold that focus so strong that you become it.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Lisa. It's such an honor to have you on the show. And I am looking forward to you speaking at the Alliance conference this year. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And maybe we'll have another discussion about that at some point.
Okay, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.